If you're a Pittsburgh baseball fan, then this is the podcast for you. Make your way down, grab a beverage, and get ready to talk Pirates with myself, Craig Toth, and Scott Jackson, two of the biggest fans you'll ever meet. This is Bucks in the Basement.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but then the next day it's different. They change, but they don't know what they want. All they do is change. Going left, going right, travel day, travel night. That's where we'll go. No excuses, no goodbyes, no one cries, no one lies. We'll never know.
I kind of like recording our show a couple days after the Pirates make moves so we can take it all in, make some assessments, not make, knee-jerk reactions to the stuff that happens, because if you'd have seen my text or my DM to Scott immediately following the Adam Frazier news, probably be having a little bit of a different show. Scott, how you doing today, brother?
One step closer to spring. So I'm doing all right. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good, man. And yeah, I mean, we talk about wanting the Pirates to make moves and to do stuff. And when they do end up picking up a player, the immediate reaction is, not that guy. I wanted the other guy. I wanted somebody else. Somebody who maybe even is in the same ilk or from the same vein as like an Adam Frazier, but it's not the player that they want. The Pirates make a few moves, if you want to say a flurry of moves, based upon what had been happening over the past couple of weeks. Ryan Baracki back on a minor league deal, something that had been mentioned across Pirates social media off and on. Kind of seemed like, maybe a good move to make for them. Adding another bullpen arm, a lefty, Mr. Meza, another guy who could hit, could not hit. We don't know. He pitched pretty well a couple years ago, didn't pitch very well last year. So it's basically taking, at least if we take the bullpen moves first, you spent $10.5 million on Aroldis Chapman last year. Chapman did pretty well. The rest of the bullpen kind of fell apart. Now you can maybe take that $10.5 million and spread it across a bunch of players and see if you can build a bullpen that way.
Which I think is probably the better way to go, because even for $10.5 million, I mean, you have a future Hall of Famer in Aroldis Chapman, but he wasn't the lockdown setup guy and eventually de facto closer that you would want for $10.5 million when you're not even hardly paying, your top position players that kind of money. But yeah, Tim Meza, I mean, an established arm, kind of a middle of the road guy going into his age 33 season. Split last year between Toronto and the Yankees. Beginning of the year wasn't so great, but kind of stabilized by the end. Nothing crazy, sinker slider guy, ground ball pitcher. Fastball sits in that like 93 and a half range. So you have to put together the bullpen. And like you said, we social media, Pirate Twitter has been saying, please, for the love of God, just make a move. And it's like, oh, hey, we signed Adam Frazier. Well, not that move. Anybody but him. But to be honest, when he was with the Pirates before, I enjoyed watching him, but I was excited that they sold high on him when they did. It was one of those obvious opportunities where you're like, okay, this is the highest that this guy is gonna be. Get the most that you can for him. And now they're trying to run it back. You need guys that can make contact, guys that can get on base. And so hopefully he can be that depth lefty piece, that utility guy. Alex Stumpf is reporting, according to his sources, that they don't see him as the fix in the outfield. So that made me feel a little bit better. And like we were saying before we went and started recording, $1.5 million. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. You cut bait, you move on. They've got a million middle infielders just next up.
Yeah, you can just kind of churn through those guys. And that was what my immediate reaction was is, citing Adam Frazier, who's primarily a second baseman, can play, a little bit of outfield, but, for the most part, his mark there doesn't have a ton of position flexibility in the infield. Has played some third base. I think he even got thrown at first base
One game
if,
last year.
for one
One game.
game. So yeah, I mean, for the most part, he's a second baseman. And like I said, I was like, man, we have like 10 second basemen. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you have a bunch of guys. I mean, you have Jared Triolo, who started at second base last year. IKF can move to second base. Nick Gonzalez, the presumptive, starter at this point in time, and then go down to like Alika Williams, Nick York, Billy Cook can play some second base. You have, Emmanuel Valdez, who you traded for from the Red Sox. But when and Scott is still counting,
Spencer
I
Horwitz.
think we're about, what are we at? Spencer
He
Horwitz can play there.
play
G1
second
Bay, I
base,
guess, if you want to.
You're counting
I mean,
him.
technically can play second base. I mean, if
Sure.
you're going on the 40 man, you have Sung Chae Chang. I mean, we could go on and on with that. So I mean, we're to about 10 right there. But the commonality between a lot of those is that either they've come to the majors and maybe had some success in Nick Gonzalez's case, but still had under 400 plate appearances last year, had a 709 OPS. That was just below average. I think it was a 96 OPS plus. So he's like your most successful, most seasoned guy out of like who you have as like those second base guys. Because I mean, Jared Triolo right now played a lot of his time with, Cabrian Hayes being out at third base. You don't know what's going to happen with Cabrian. So you have Cabrian Hayes, injury last year. IKF before he came over, injury. Nick Gonzalez was down for around a month, I believe it was last year. So if one of those guys would happen to go down again, I mean, you're filling that with like the Alika Williams, the Yorks, the different things like that. I mean, Adam Frazier wouldn't be the worst person to put in that position to allow some of these younger guys who, in York, everybody said, well, I'd rather see York. Well, guess what? I think I'd probably rather see York too, just because he's younger. There's a little bit more upside, but there's also those bumps in the road that can happen. I mean, we just saw it with Jack Sawinski last year. Once we thought he had his footing, and then the bottom just absolutely fell out on him last year. I mean, Nick Gonzalez had a solid season, but going in with, okay, he is our answer. Like, he is our second baseman. Well, what happens if he starts to slip a little bit right there? Who are you going to lean back on? If Nick York then comes up and then he starts to slip because he gets, doesn't hit the ground running as a rookie, having Adam Frazier kind of in that position to not really be counted on or relied upon, but it's almost like that break in case of emergency, that veteran lefty bat off of the bench. I can't really be too upset about this. And like I said to you before we hopped on here, we had talked about, the needs of this team. Obviously, there's still that glaring hole in the corner outfield spot. We'll say right field because, Brian Reynolds played left field last year. Everybody knows I want to move Brian Reynolds to right field. But let's just say the outfield spot. There was those holes in the bullpen. You wanted to see some more depth, or at least, some players brought in for that. I mean, Ben Cherington has brought in how many guys so far? I mean, on minor league deals, major league deals. I mean, he is putting as much depth as possible as you can with that bullpen. And then after that, I said, backup middle infielder to provide that depth so you aren't just turning straight to Alika Williams or straight to some of these younger guys. And heck, for me, I said even just like a a starting pitcher. They're stretching Caleb Ferguson out, but I mean, lightning striking twice of, going from Jones to Bubba. Yes, can it happen? But I mean, I also don't want to put that pressure on Bubba either. So it's a long winded way of me saying Adam Frazier, definitely not a sexy move. Definitely not, the move that we were all looking for. But it's also not causing us to maybe rely on guys before they're ready or in case they have some sophomore slump.
Yeah, he's not at the top of my shopping list. He's not the guy I would have gone to. I don't think he would have been my first call. But like you said, how many times have we ended a season thinking, "Oh, okay, we've got a guy for this position moving forward," and then the next season comes, they take the steps back. Jack, like you said, is the perfect example of that. We're thinking, "Oh, we got 30 home runs out of Jack. You can just put that in ink," and then it doesn't happen, and so you kind of scramble to find the solution there. Adam Frazier is a veteran, former All Star. He's been playing in the playoffs the last handful of years, so he can bring that veteran presence to the team of young players and help them take a step forward. And again, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. You're not out, and that's part of, as we've driven it into the ground in this slow off season, is the economics of baseball. The Pirates cannot afford to go out and take big risks. So these are the kind of signings in this current economic climate of Major League Baseball that you are going to get for teams like the Pirates and maybe a few teams above where the Pirates are payroll wise.
Yeah, and I looked, just kind of glanced at the free agent shortstop market, the free agent second base market. I mean, you're looking at guys who I think I may have mentioned on the podcast. One of them I know I probably did was, Paul DeYoung. Can he have that 24 home run season again? Hit very well for the Chicago White Sox. They were pleasantly surprised by it. Didn't help out their team a whole lot, but you're looking at him. You're looking at like a Kike Hernandez. Not a ton. I mean, there's risk. There's not a ton of upside with any of these guys. So I mean, that's kind of where Adam Frazier falls into. Definitely did not have a great season with Kansas City last year. I think you mentioned a 202 batting average, 4 home runs. Just really, saw his K rate go up above wherever it had ever been in his career. But, the previous season with the Orioles, he was around a one WAR player and performed fairly well as, you know, a backup, a utility man, not counted on to be the starter. So, I mean, I think that's probably the ceiling for Adam Frazier. You would hope that the ceiling for a Nick Gonzalez or a Jared Triolo or a Nick York for this season in 2025 would be higher than that. But I feel like with Adam Frazier, I mean, the floor that you're looking at was what he did last year. And if he did, does what he did last year, then, I mean, at some point in time, you're hoping that one of the younger players will take the reins from him and they can either move on from him or that, he just kind of like middles on the bench for the entire season and hopefully still gets pushed out of the way. So, I mean, 1.5, Adam Frazier, it is what it is. It's a move, and it's not the, like I said, the sexy move. It's not the part of the building that you want to see, but it's kind of a necessity when you have this young of a team. And sure, I mean, you could have taken a risk on you could have taken a risk on Kim, and you don't know what his shoulder looks like. You could take a risk on, I saw like a Jorge Polanco. You don't know what his knee is like and had a horrible season last year. And, one of them's getting 13 million, the other one's getting 7.5 million. That doesn't work out for a team like the Pirates. I don't know what you're doing to move on from that. You sign Adam Frazier for 1.525 and it doesn't work out.
Mhm.
You Todd Frazier him. You just move
Right.
on.
Especially when you have guys in place like Nick Gonzalez that we have high hopes for. We've seen good things. We've seen those flashes, and Nick York, who I did read some. Keith Law talked about maybe potentially he's the kind of guy that could challenge for leading the league in doubles. Thinks that there's a possibility of him making some all-star teams because he's going to hit for such a high batting average more than likely. So you have promise there. You don't have to go out and spend this money. I mean, the Rays are in a position where they have to go get Kim because of the disaster that happened with Wander Franco, and that was unforeseen. That whole situation and opening up that hole, and yeah, a guy that you have questions about with his health, and then you throw a whole bunch of money at him like that, or at least relatively for a Pirates fan, the money can be spent better. I really, they could silence a lot of critics if they threw some money at right field and really tried to find a solution there for the season and not just take a flyer on a guy.
Yeah, and I think that most of those guys have probably passed unless you're going, the trade route. But even the guys that are being like discussed on the trade route, the biggest one, is Luis Robert, and the teams that are interested in him. But it's also another guy who hasn't been able to stay on the field. I think we went over that at some point in time. I know that I did, might have been around the trade deadline, and there was only one season during his career where he's out there for over 100 games and coming off a disastrous year. And even if the White Sox take on some of the money, which I think they would almost be forced to do, I mean, in the end, you're not, really getting a solution. You're getting what could be, another problem.
Right.
So, I mean, and one of our guys, like I saw somebody comment on the thing because you shared that, what was it, Austin Hayes was signed, and you said another one gone, and it was like somebody asked, well, were they even interested? And I was just going to respond, but sometimes I just choose not to respond on social media. And was just basically be like, no, I don't know if they were interested or not, but he's one
Yeah.
of those guys that was in that tier of players that, we had kind of talked about as being, a possible option, maybe not a solution, but I mean, you're kind of looking at like these bounce back candidates and somebody that could perform, but it's the same thing with like a Michael A. Taylor last year is like a $4 million contract, and it doesn't work out. And you could have possibly moved on at some point in time, but there was really nobody to come up and really, fill that void if you did. But it kind of seems like it would be the same type of move. So, I mean, Pirates fans don't get too excited because I do still think they are going to sign somebody for the outfield. I don't see how they can't sign somebody for the outfield.
Hmm.
It may just be very Adam Frazier esque
Right.
if
Underwhelming. Yeah.
yeah, if I had to say.
If the Reds leave any players for anybody else, I mean, is there anybody that they're not attached to? Luis Robert, they got Austin Hayes. Right before we came on, there's some reports it could be a dark horse candidate for Pete Alonso. You know, maybe it's comforting. It makes me a little happy that they keep coming up short. But you're going to find players that want to play for Tito. So this is an opportunity that's the other part of going and getting a manager like that is that he can recruit in a way that Derek Shelton can't. And so let's just hope if they fall flat.
Yeah, I don't know if that's just a trying to build up the market for him so that like the Mets aren't like bidding against themselves at this point in time, because it kind of seems that way to a degree.
Yeah,
Uh, the Blue Jays are out there making moves and adding some
yeah.
players and doing
Scherzer.
different things, and getting and filling some holes, and they do still have a first baseman, so I mean, one that they have at least for this year, and if they're going to make a push for something. But yeah, it's not stuff I like to see out there of the Reds being a dark horse for somebody that could have that type of impact on a team.
Only if it's gonna work like it happened last time when they spent a bunch of money and it got them nowhere, and they had to blow everything up again. And that kind of retooling fails, then you maybe do the thing that we caution the Pirates about doing, because we've talked about this before, that the Pirates could go out and spend a bunch of money and get these guys, but if they don't perform, then you've kind of wasted a lot of those resources, and you have to take another step back, where slow and steady is kind of how they're doing it, where you see the Reds take maybe two shots at it for every one that the Pirates do.
Yeah, very slow, very steady. But we've been mentioning money here and
Mm.
the game of money, and we did get a decision on Johan Oviedo. We had predicted that he would probably get the lower amount, unfortunately, due to having, not pitched during this last season. So, I mean, it's not much of a raise. I don't think he was even asking for much of a raise, but for a player that you don't know what you have in him, you don't know exactly how he's going to come back from Tommy John, don't know exactly what role he's going to play this year, and is coming into his first year of arbitration after having, one pretty good season and another up and downs with the Cardinals, middling, coming in some relief and different stuff. Unfortunately, if you would just look at that 1 year, yeah, maybe I could see it, but you have to look at the totality of his career so far. And last year he didn't pitch, had one good season, and didn't really do a ton before that. So, I mean, we said the lower number was where they were going to land. And I don't think it's anything like it's not that I wanted him to get the lower amount of money. It just
Yeah.
was kind of pointed in that direction.
Yeah, it, you know, it's it's not surprising. Like we've talked, the precedent stands there. It was $300,000 difference between how the two teams filed. So, uh, he's gonna have to really, really make it up, and maybe he can have a strong year and make up for it next year.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope so for him. I just love some of the headlines though, because it's like Pirates defeat
Yeah,
Oviedo, and I don't even know who wrote that headline. I would love to give them
I
credit,
saw
but I
that
just kind of
too.
but I read that and I was just like, no, the Pirates won the arbitration. Like it wasn't like a defeat of him.
Right.
And I mean, it's a business. They run it like a business, and they looked at the precedents that had been set, and there wasn't much of it. And he got a raise, and I mean,
And that's
he's
a
going to
lot of
come out
money
and
to
he's going
you
to
and
pitch.
me. It's $300,000 is a lot of money to you and me, but in the grand scheme of Major League Baseball and professional sports, you know, it's whatever to them.
Yeah, and we'll get Dennis Santana's at some point because I did see a report out there that they're waiting till, for some reason, other cases are finished and filed before they decide on him. So maybe there is some decision making, some I guess they're thinking about it maybe a little bit more based
Hmm.
on other players and how they had filed as well. So looks like we'll get a decision with that at some point in time. But for now, I mean, Johan Oviedo was always going to be a part of the 2025 Pirates. We do know what his salary is now, and then basically trying to figure out what his role is going to be and how he's going to come back from Tommy John, because I mean that's what we're moving towards here now is we're actually moving towards the season. In a few weeks here we're going to be able to talk about actual baseball games. In 2 weeks we're going to be able to talk about at least those grainy photos that every single beat reporter is going to be taking from behind like screens and stuff, and how guys look like they're in the best shape of their lives. But I mean, that's just kind of like getting the business stuff out of the way and moving towards that. But the Pirates, in some ways, I don't know if they're trying to put a hold on that or what they're trying to do. They put out a wonderful survey, Scott, that you just discovered tonight that you
Yeah,
got,
found it
which
buried in my email. Yeah.
yeah, but it made for some headlines on Pirate social media, on X, on Facebook, and different stuffs. But I mean, we had a conversation about this, and for me, yes, there is a lot of blowback on social media. But for the most part, I mean, I saw this more as a barometer, a litmus test for the Pirates organization to speak to or get feedback from the common fan. We know that I don't believe every single Pirates fan got this. We also know that not every single Pirates fan either has social media, interacts with people on social media, is in tuned or insane about the Pirates as much as myself and Scott and other podcasters and writers out there, and don't know the ins and outs of what's going on with the team. So just taking a general, how we doing? What do you think might need to improve? And just are we doing a good job? It's almost like I said, like it's like that survey you get from your employer, like, are you happy with your company? And obviously the vocal piece of this, and what we've seen across Pirate social media is going to be, it's not going to be good for this type of thing, because you have those people that are either tuned in or will comment negatively or positively about every single thing that's put out there. And it's not really a picture. I mean, as I've talked about before, and as myself and Chris used to talk about all the time, is social media is not real life. Like it is, and especially within the Pirates organization and within Pirates fandom, it is a very small subset of fans.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you think about it, the largest groups on Twitter or on Facebook or whatever have like maybe like 20,000, 30,000 people, quote unquote, following that group or engaged with that group. I mean, so like you at some point in time do need to see, okay, we saw a protest at Pirates Fest. We see all of this stuff going across social media and stuff. How does the Pirates fan in general think we're doing?
Yeah.
I think that that's what it is. It's a nothing burger to me.
Yeah, I think it's something that they typically do in the off season to get a barometer to kind of feel out how the PR is going. I guess it's possible that they saw what happened at Pirates Fest and decided to run this to see if it's a bigger consensus across the people that are tuning. Because, like you said, obviously, it would make sense to do season ticket holders because those are people that are actively spending the most money at the ballpark. I would imagine also people who are Pirates insiders on the mailing list because they have the ability to reach out to them. Now they must have already either I waited too long to find it, or they already got the answers that they wanted because it says that the survey is not currently active. When I went to fill it out, I thought it'd be fun to
Oh
like
goodness.
fill it out on the podcast here. But I think that that's probably more the idea of these people that are a little more tuned in to the fan or to the team. What are they thinking? What are their thoughts on that? Because those are the people that are going to sign up for the mailing list. It's not like the days where you'd be walking around the mall and somebody would come, an intern would come up with a pad and a pencil and ask you some questions and just grab a random person off the street and get their feeling. That would be a more true barometer of how the market feels. So I think that if they are trying to, they maybe that is the closest to being reactionary. That it is seeing the billboards, seeing the protests, seeing the people speaking up during the events and saying, okay, well, we've got a few people that are actively saying this and taking these steps and spending money to demonstrate in this way. How much of the fan base actually feels this way, and do we need to fine tune our outreach, our public relations to counteract that sentiment?
Yeah, because I can tell you the majority of Pirates fans that I interact with outside of social media, like don't even like I said, don't even have social media. Don't even read the types of stuff they'll read. Some articles, they'll watch the games, they'll do whatever. So it's like more of like like I said, the diehard fans that are on there and refreshing, X to see what moves are going to be made, different types of things like that. I mean, obviously that blowback and that feedback is not going to be good for now. I mean, in the end, like for me, like I said, we're moving towards the season. This is
Yeah.
just kind of one of those blips that happens, and it happens a lot every offseason. They send out a survey every offseason. Some of this had more poignant questions about, moving towards winning baseball and different stuff like that. But for me, it was just like okay, in the end, like you're going to have your team on paper. It may not look like the best team. Um, let's see how it plays out. Like we've mentioned before, last year the Pirates were ranked as by like a few lists as having the top like five bullpen in all
Eh,
of Major League Baseball, and then they end up with a bottom five bullpen in Major League Baseball. I mean, eventually the games are going to have to be played. So, I mean, everybody go out and get your clicks by, talking about the survey and taking the
yeah.
survey and doing whatever you need to do. But for me, it to me, it's like, I don't know if even if they got a flood of "we are not happy" types of things that it would change and they would
Yeah.
do anything any differently.
I think they like to stick to the plan, but you also have to take into account where we're at. It's towards the end of the off season. Was it Batman that said it's always darkest before the dawn? So we're getting to that point where everybody's antsy for spring training. I can't wait to see the videos and hear the popping of the gloves and get that feel of spring. And yeah, I think we're just kind of anxious for actual baseball activities to start. So the fan base is getting restless and dissatisfied with the lack of moves that are being made. It's been a very slow, very long off season, and where I'm at, it hasn't helped that it's been so damn cold. And I'm ready for spring, and baseball, and hope to spring eternal.
Yeah, and the other thing that I definitely wanted to get to because you did a little bit of research on it as well. The other thing that happens around this time of year is you start to get those top prospect lists, and of course, Pirates fans jump to those to see where their guys are at. I mean, no surprise with who's the top Pirates prospect on a lot of those lists because it's a name that everybody's been hearing this entire offseason, and that's Bubba Chandler. But there were some like kind of minor differences with how certain, you know, publications look at certain prospects. Baseball America going into last year was starting to sour on Tamar a little bit, have fully kind of soured on him, at least in the top 100 range. But what did you see, Scott, there when you were like kind of perusing through those lists to look for the Pirates prospects?
I just kind of looked at MLB Pipeline and then ESPN's Kylie McDaniel and looking and seeing where guys for the Pirates fall in those lists and see how close they are. And like you said, Bubba Chandler, he's 15 for MLB Pipeline, 11 for ESPN. And then Termar is also similar range for the two, 83 for MLB, 72 for ESPN. Now, one who I'm excited for, and he's a little ways off, that had a big difference between the two lists, Connor Griffin. And you and I, because we're plugged in with the system and we're paying attention to the interviews and hearing things and trying to watch video, see just how how yoked he's going to be going into this season and putting on all this muscle. MLB Pipeline has him at 43. Well, ESPN has him at 81. So that's a bigger discrepancy. But then two pitchers that are on one list and not the other. MLB has Thomas Harrington at 80, and ESPN doesn't even have him on the list. And then Ashcraft is number 99 for ESPN, and he's not on MLB Pipeline's list. So maybe a little difference of opinion on those guys, but yeah, it's not the farm system that we had a few years ago, but the guys are graduating. And that's another thing about as we're moving guys up into the system and then seeing if Adam Frazier is going to work and if not, plug somebody else in, is that a lot of our top prospects have already graduated and we're going through these cycles where that first cycle is done and the guys are at the major leagues and it's do it or don't, and we'll have to move on. But it's going to be a little while until that next crop is quite ready to go. You don't have a fresh replacement sitting at AAA for all these positions. And so, yeah, there's going to be time. This is where the development has to come up, has to step up. And they need to take some of these guys who are maybe fringe prospects and take them to the next level and actually do the thing that winning baseball teams and winning organizations have to do. And sometimes you have to turn a middling prospect into somebody who's actually going to produce for you.
Yeah, and you mentioned like that we're kind of going through like a cycle. Is that I mean, with Ben Charrington, it was the some college arms, definitely college bat, and it's turned to a couple drafting some high school bats, and having you know Jared Jones fly through the system, Bubba Chandler, a lot of people would say is probably going to be off the list, whereas in previous years, some of those pitchers would spend a few years on those lists. It wouldn't just be okay, you've made your way to the top. You would be like the top, in the top 10 or around the top 10 of pitching prospects for a few years, before you graduated. And these guys are kind of graduating a lot quicker than, some may have expected. I mean, Braxton Ashcraft doesn't get injured. He may have enough time under his belt to not be on that list. So, I mean, I do put some, like, you definitely, it'd be nice to have, 7, 8 guys, on that list every single year. I think for the Pirates, the bigger thing is getting the best or having the most success of the guys that do make those lists. I think that, I mean, everybody says it's probably around like, 33%. If you take your top 10 prospects, that like 33% of them will end up becoming, solid or regular Major League Baseball players. Well, you don't want to miss on those guys that are in the top. But for the Pirates, it's, in my mind, has kind of always been about getting the best out of those guys who aren't on those lists and are your kind of like fringe prospects who may be in your top 30 or may not be, or may flash onto it and then come up to the majors. Those guys are the ones that were kind of more important to me. I mean, and the Pirates, for the most part, I mean, aside from like a Skeens, a Jared Jones, I mean, Mitch Keller was a top prospect.
Mhm.
Brian Hayes was kind of up there, but then you have like a Brian Reynolds, who everybody kind of, but it wasn't like he was the name or on the tip of everybody's tongue as being like this top highly touted prospect. So you need some of those guys to work out as well.
Yeah, you can't just build a whole team off of top 100 prospects and have all those guys come through. You do have to have your surprises. You have to have those guys that just work it. And I mean, I guess he came from the Cubs, but Jay Hay, I don't remember him being, he just kind of came out of nowhere and was an important part of playoff teams and became a star for us, at least in our pond. And so those are the kind of guys that you need to supplement with. It's nice to have your O'Neill Cruzes and your Paul Skeens, of course, and Jared Jones, those kind of guys. But then to win baseball games, you have to have supporting players. And if you have a couple of those superstars, the supporting players become that much more important.
You need your 2021 Adam Fraziers.